There are a diverse set of processes available for structuring the development of software products, and these can be broken into two high-level categories. So the traditional category includes things like waterfall and spiral, whereas the more modern category includes processes like XP, TDD, and Scrum. Now, one thing that's really important to note is that there is no one true process. The process that any team chooses to follow is going to vary based on their own constraints, experience, and what needs to happen within the product itself. And we're going to step through today and talk about all of these different processes in a little bit more detail. The waterfall model is considered a classic software development methodology that's been adapted from more traditional engineering fields. In the waterfall model, what we're going to do is we're going to go from one step to the next in the development process without ever stepping back. So we want to make sure that each step is finished to completion before we carry on with the next phase of the project. So in the requirements phase, what we're going to do is we're going to collect all of the requirements for the system. And once everything is together and we've built a comprehensive specification document, we're going to move on to design. In the design step, what we're going to do is we're going to consume that specification document and design the system and come up with all the different components, classes, methods, fields, and all the different parts of the system and figure out what they are in advance before we start building. And once that's ready, we'll move on to implementation. So implementation will take all of this design documentation and be given to the development team, and they'll use that to go and actually write the code to the system and get it all ready to hand off for verification. So once the system is entirely written, it will be passed down to a verification team who will then go and take the specification defined earlier, come up with a set of test plans, and use it to verify that the implementation is correct. And once we have a working implementation, it will be passed off and down to the maintenance team who will go and evolve the system over time. Now, one huge downside of this process is it's not until we get to the very end that we know that the system that we've built is actually useful in practice. And if we have a long-running system, for instance, that runs or takes 5 years to develop, it can take an extremely long time for us to realize that we've made some problem back at the requirements phase. One other challenge of the waterfall model is that the resistance to moving back to a previous stage can be really problematic in practice. For instance, if business conditions change, we're not going to want to go back and step back and change the requirements, but that can be really detrimental to the end product. Or if the company itself is reorganized in some way, this can also be problematic. So the waterfall model is extremely resistant to change in practice. Because all of the phases in the waterfall model are extremely distinct, it's really easy to understand what's actually happening in the development of the system at any given time. The other nice thing that's really nice about waterfall is that there's a clear and explicit handoff between each of these phases. When we hand the specification from requirements to design, we know exactly what that document is, and it's explicitly signed off for both by the design team for receiving it and the requirements team for passing it on. The same when we moved from design to implementation. The implementation team doesn't get to jump the gun and start early. They get a complete and well thought out design that gets handed to them, and they can explicitly start with the knowledge that what they've been given is the complete design of the system. So the clarity between each of these phases is extremely nice. Of course, this again feeds back into the negative aspects of waterfall in that the clarity makes it really hard to revisit prior steps to change the design or requirements later on in the process. So there really is a trade-off that makes waterfall a challenging prospect with many modern systems that want to be more agile and responsive to customer and user needs.